Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. I'm going to let all of our attendees trickle in. Great. Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started then. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar on the plastic program and specifically developing a plastic program project. We saw a lot of interest in our registration, so it's great to see the enthusiasm and interest for this program. You'll hear from me, Kristen Linscott, a senior program officer supporting plastics policy and markets at Verra, as well as Varun Agarwal, who's a technical manager that supports the plastic program on our program management department. And this is relevant because he's one of the key people that is in charge of reviewing projects and is very familiar with the process. So it's great to have him here today. For those who don't know us already, Verra is a nonprofit standard setter. Through our suite of standards programs, we enable the credible, transparent, and robust assessment of projects driving environmental and social change. Over 3,000 projects in more than 95 countries use our programs to gain access to important climate and sustainable development finance. Here's what you can expect from today's webinar. We'll provide an overview of Verra's plastic program. We'll walk through the project lifecycle for a plastic program project. We'll highlight some key documents and resources that are relevant to any project proponent or project developer interested in using the program. And then we'll discuss the first steps for getting started. And before we wrap up for some live Q&A, we will be sure to discuss some frequently asked questions related to the plastic credit market. And as I mentioned, there will be live Q&A at the end of the presentation. So as questions come up for you, you can use the Q&A feature in Zoom to submit those questions, and we'll try to address as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. We are recording this session, so all participants will receive a copy of the recording should they want to reference back to it or share it with other colleagues. And with that, I will get us started. We have a lot of great information to cover today, and I'll kick us off by talking about what the plastic program is, should you not be familiar already. So Verra operates the plastic program, which provides a framework for accounting and crediting activities that contribute to collecting or recycling additional plastic waste. In this next section, we'll walk through the process of registering with the program in detail, but this graphic provides a simple illustration of the elements involved. The premise is that projects across the world can certify themselves with the program, and after undergoing a third-party audit and review by Verra to confirm their activities' conformance with our requirements, they're issued plastic credits. Projects can then sell these credits to organizations as a means of funding their activities. And in terms of the types of activities eligible, this program is relevant to projects collecting or recycling additional plastic waste. And that's inclusive of any of the 7 types of plastic or composite materials that contain plastic, such as those beverage cartons or multi-layered packaging. I do want to note that while we recognize the importance of activities such as reuse systems, refill stations, or the use of alternative materials, these activities that reduce the amount of plastic that needs to be produced, these are not currently in the scope of the program. And we should mention that while we generally refer to plastic credits, there are 2 types of plastic credits: waste collection credits and waste recycling credits. WCCs are issued for every ton of plastic waste that's collected and sent to one of the appropriate end destinations defined by the collection methodology. And WRCs are issued for every ton of plastic waste that's recycled into a material that can displace the use of virgin plastic. Since the program's launch in 2021, we've seen over 50 projects list, signifying that they've initiated the registration process and intend to issue plastic credits. These projects are spread across the world, demonstrating that the program can be used by a variety of activities in different geographies. And of those projects listed, 5 have completed the registration process, and we have many more in the final stages of review. So we expect that number of registered projects to grow in the coming months. Before we begin speaking about the core content of this presentation, that being, how does one develop a project, I do want to take a moment to clarify our role as an independent standards setter. In our role, we don't develop projects or provide consulting or advisory services, and we can't assess a project's eligibility ahead of the formal registration or verification request. That said, we are always here as a resource and expert on our own requirements. So following this presentation, if you do start to begin the process of developing a project and have questions, we're always happy to provide guidance if a project needs clarification about the intent or meaning behind a requirement. We can answer questions about the registration or verification process and the steps involved. And of course, please remember that as part of our responsibility as a standard setter, we maintain and update the program requirements. Thus, we always welcome feedback on their feasibility and usability. Before I pass it over to Varun to spend some time talking about the steps involved in registering and issuing plastic credits with this program, I do want to share one reminder. This presentation is a supplement to the requirements described in the program documents, but should not be a substitute for referring to them. We'll cover what these documents are and the key documents and resource sections so you know what to reference if you're ready to get started. That concludes what I am sharing, and I will pass it over to Varun.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for setting the context and handing over to me. And thank you for the introduction in the beginning. So now, as Kristen mentioned, we'll spend some time speaking about the steps involved in registering and issuing the plastic credits with the plastic program. So in order to be eligible to issue plastic credits, a project needs to register with the plastic program. And registering with the plastic program begins with preparing a project description, followed by listing the project on the registry, validation by a VVB, post which a project can request registration, and Verra conducts a completeness and accuracy review of that request, which may result in findings which need to be addressed by the VVB. And then upon the successful closure of the registration review, the project is registered. Now you might be wondering how a registered project can generate plastic credits. So once the project is registered, it can begin monitoring its activities and prepare a monitoring report, followed by opening a verification public comment period and verification by a VVB, and then it can request verification approval. Similar to the registration stage, there could be findings that we might raise during the verification approval review, and once all those are closed, projects can generate credits for quantities verified by the VVB in the verification report. I'm sure all these terminologies, validation, verification, VVB, might sound unfamiliar or new to all of you, but don't worry, we'll be going into the details of all of these in the subsequent slides. To give you a sense of the timelines, the registration process could take around 6 to 12 months, and the verification approval may take 4 to 8 months in the best case scenario, but these could take longer depending upon various factors such as complexity of the findings, time taken by the VVB or the project proponent to close the findings, and other variables which are external factors. And I'd also like to share that projects also have an option to combine registration and verification approval by conducting validation and verification jointly. Now, what that means in practice is that projects that have already begun operating and have activities to verify can combine their validation with the verification of the first monitoring period. Now, these projects can complete the steps for registration and verification simultaneously, beginning with preparation of a joint project description and monitoring report, opening up of one public comment period, followed by joint validation and verification, and then requesting the registration and verification approval together. Once the registration and verification approval are approved, these projects can generate plastic credits. Now, going further, I'll elaborate now on the individual steps involved in the project lifecycle, beginning with the first step, which is to prepare and list the project description. The project description documents how a project is designed to meet the program rules and requirements. It is to be prepared in English using a template, which is available on the Verra website. And this template provides all the instructional text or the guidance which enables the preparation of this document so that project proponents have it handy what to include in the document and how the conformance is to be demonstrated. Just some instructions are there. And currently, these templates are in the form of Word documents, but we are also in the process of digitizing the preparation and submission of project documents, post which these documents will be prepared using the digital project submission tool. My colleague Kristen will provide more details about it later during the webinar. Now, important things to note here are that projects should have evidence to support the statements they make within the project description, and any data to support those statements or any report references which are being used should be included in the project description. But all the other documents and supporting evidence to demonstrate conformance with the rules and requirements can be provided directly to the VVB at the time of validation, and they need not be included at the stage of listing with Verra. Finally, another important aspect, project proponents can prepare the project description themselves or can also choose to hire a consultant to help with the preparation if they wish to, but that is not required. Once the project description is ready, the second step or one of the major milestones in the project lifecycle would be to request listing by uploading all the requisite documents to the Verra registry, the details of which can be found in section 5.4 of the Plastic Program Guide. And upon the receipt of this request, a listing review is conducted by Verra to ensure that the documents have sufficient information to enable public comment. The first step in the listing review involves a completeness check, which is conducted by the Verra registry team, post which the project review team, that is our team, reviews the project within 10 business days. I'd also like to highlight that this review does not assess project's eligibility with the program rules and requirements, but we could request updates related to the completeness of the documents. For example, if a certain section does not have enough information or is excluded, for example, by mistake or something. So those kind of updates could be requested from projects, which may impact the 10 business day listing timeline. Once the documents are deemed sufficiently complete for listing, the project is listed, meaning the project documents are made public on the Verra registry for a 30-day public comment period. The 30-day public comment period provides an opportunity to the wider stakeholders to provide feedback on the project and also ask questions about the project and its design. Now, these comments or questions are submitted to the Verra registry, and after the public comment period is over, Verra project review team compiles all the public comments and shares them with the project proponent. Now, there are two important things that I'd like to note here. First, that the public comment period does not fulfill the stakeholder engagement requirements of the plastic standard. Every project needs to demonstrate conformance with the stakeholder engagement requirements in the standard independent of this public comment period. And second, the public comment period must begin before the validation so that any comments that are received during this public comment period can be assessed by the auditors during the validation. For more information about the public comment periods, you can refer to section 5.3 of the Plastic Program Guide. Now, after the project has been listed, it is eligible to undergo validation by auditors known as validation verification bodies, who are tasked with assessing whether the project meets all the rules and requirements of the plastic program and how it's demonstrating conformance with all of them. The validation and verification bodies are approved by Verra, and a list of approved VVBs can be accessed on the Verra website. And a VVB may conduct site visits to assess whether the project is designed to meet the plastic program requirements and may require evidences to support the statements made in the PD. In the best case scenario, it may be possible to complete the validation within 4 to 6 months of completing the public comment period, but that may also vary depending on the project complexity, VVB capacity, the audit findings, and also ultimately the time taken by the project proponents to address any findings that the VVB might raise during the validation. Currently, we have 4 approved VVBs for the plastic program, and I'll take this opportunity to highlight that we are in the process of approving a few more VVBs in the first quarter of this year, so that there are more VVBs and you can benefit from their services. Now, once the validation is completed, which means that the auditor has finalized their report and it's ready for submission to Verra, a project needs to undergo registration review by requesting registration by submitting the requisite documents, which are listed on this slide, and that will trigger the registration review by Verra. Now, the registration review, similar to a listing review, will involve completeness check by the Verra registry team, where they will check the documents for completeness, all the representations, the legal documents, all whether the requirements are being met as far as those documents are concerned. And in addition to that, there is a thorough accuracy review by our team, that is a project review team, which takes up to 30 business days. During this review, we assess thoroughly whether all the requirements, all the rules and requirements are being met and how the conformance is being demonstrated with the various program rules and requirements. Now, as a result of this review, we may raise findings, which could be in the form of clarifications or request more information to ensure that all the program rules and requirements are being confirmed to, and those are raised in the form of a project review report, which is shared with the VVB once it's ready. Sections 5.6 and 5.7 of the plastic program guide provide more information about these steps. Now, once the project review report is shared with the VVB is responsible for working with the project proponent to address all the findings raised within 60 days. Once the findings have been addressed, the updated documentation is supposed to be returned to Verra by the VVB. And once that's done, Verra takes around 10 business days to review the updates and close the findings, or in case there are more, I'd say, clarifications needed, or if there is more information that's required, we may raise around 2 findings as needed, depending on the project. And yes, if there is another round that's raised, similar process is followed. Once the updated documents are returned, we take 10 business days to review them and also close those findings. And I'd like to note here that the project requests will be denied if the findings are not closed in 3 rounds of review. And also these things impact the timelines to register by adding more time. This back and forth doesn't really help neither the project proponents nor us, because it adds to the timelines. And that is why it is important to maintain high quality project and audit documents, so that to maximize efficiency and reduce the time required at this stage. Once all the findings are addressed and the documents are sufficient for registration, the project is registered by Verra on the Verra registry, and it becomes eligible to issue plastic credits. Now, that's the first stage. I'd say it's a major milestone, which means that the project has been confirmed to be adhering to all the rules and requirements of the plastic program as far as its design is concerned. But in order to generate or issue plastic credits, projects now need to start monitoring their activities and get those verified by a VVB. Now, in the next few slides, we'll talk about what a registered project needs to do in order to generate plastic credits. So after a project has been registered, as I said, projects can start monitoring their activities, for which they need to prepare a monitoring report to document how the activity has been implemented and how it's demonstrating conformance with the rules and requirements. And this monitoring report details the plastic waste collected and or recycled in the period, and provides all the various details. For example, which types of materials are being collected, provides those breakdowns as needed as per the monitoring report. And a monitoring report is prepared for each period a project wants to issue plastic credits for. And projects are free to choose the length of their monitoring period. Generally, from our experience, projects aim to verify every 1 to 2 years. But there are certain requirements in the plastic standard that I'd like to highlight here, specifically the VVB rotation requirement, which requires projects to rotate VVBs every 3 years. Thus, the monitoring period, therefore, cannot be more than 3 years. And an important thing to note here is that monitoring periods need to be contiguous with no time gaps between them. So once the monitoring report is ready, the next step for the project would be to open a verification public comment period by submitting the monitoring report to Verra. Now, once this monitoring report is received by Verra, the registry team, similar to the listing stage and also to the registration stage, completes a completeness check, followed by a completeness review by our team, that is a project review team, which could take up to 10 business days. And similar to the listing stage, we really don't assess the conformance or eligibility at this stage, but we just ensure that the various sections of the monitoring report are complete for the public comment period. And once that's confirmed, we open a verification public comment period, post which projects can begin verification of their activities by the VVP. Now, in the verification, similar to validation, the VVB is required to assess whether the project has been implemented implemented in accordance with all the plastic program requirements. And here also confirms that the monitoring plan is being adhered to, verifies the quantities, reviews all the evidence related to collection and recycling, and all the other various checks that are required. And for the various rules and requirements related to verification, you can refer to Section 4 of the Plastic Standard, which also lays out the rules for the accreditation requirements for the third-party validation and verification bodies, in addition to rules and requirements for validation and verification of projects. So similar to a validation review, once the verification is over, the projects need to request a verification approval from Verra. And for that, a project needs to submit all the requisite documents as listed on the slide: monitoring report, verification report, the various representations, and then request this verification approval review. And similarly, similar to all the reviews, I think I've said this enough, and I'll reiterate once. We follow the same steps. There's a completeness check by the Verra registry team, where we check for the completeness of documents, and then there's a thorough accuracy review by the project review team, which could take up to 30 business days. And similar to a validation review, as a result of this verification approval review, we may raise findings to request clarifications or more information that may be needed for certain sections of the reports. So that is done, and we prepare a findings report and share it with the VVP. And similar to validation, those findings need to be addressed by the VVP and the project proponent. And once that is done, a project is ready to, I'd say, generate plastic credits, which is the ultimate, I'd say, end goal for any project, that they are eligible now to generate plastic credits for the quantities that have been verified. Now, post-verification approval, as I said, issuance of the plastic credits can be requested. And I'd like to highlight here that all the issued plastic credits are unique and include a serial number with the type of credit, whether that's a waste collection credit or a waste recycling credit, the location where the activity occurred. It also highlights the material type, for example, PET, HDPE, or whatever that is, and some other attributes related to the activity. So this is, I'd say, the last step in the life cycle of a project, and the most significant one, where projects can actually now start issuing and rather engaging in all the various steps, selling the credits, or whatever those may be. And as stated before, projects which pursue joint validation and verification, they can request registration and verification approval together. So for them, they become eligible to issue plastic credits and also generate plastic credits at the same time. So now moving on to the next section. In the last set of slides, I think we talked about, I think there was a lot of stuff there, and I hope it was useful. And we're happy to take any questions about any of the steps that were just described. And I am sure you might have noticed that there were certain sections which were highlighted in those slides, some related to the plastic standard, some related to the plastic program guide. So I'm sure you'd be wondering where all these rules and requirements can be referenced. So now I'm going to walk you through the key documents and resources that need to be referenced while developing a project, which lay out the key rules and requirements. So just giving an overview of the program, the plastic standard, as you can see here in this slide, forms the core of the program and lays out all the rules and requirements that all projects are required to meet. And the project impacts must be accounted for by using the plastic waste collection or recycling methodologies. So plastic waste collection methodology and the recycling methodology lays out specific procedures for monitoring, also the applicability conditions that every project must adhere to if they wish to register as a collection or recycling project. And then projects developed under the program are required to follow a rigorous assessment process in order to be certified and that is done by the VVBs, which is through desk and field audits. And finally, the last and a very important component of the program is the Verra registry, which is the central storehouse of all the data, all the information related to the projects. The documents are made available to the public through the Verra registry. And also, most importantly, the registry tracks the generation, retirement, and also the cancellation of plastic credits. Now, moving on to the next important resource, the Plastic Program Guide, which details out the process for registering and issuing plastic credits. We talked at length about the various steps, so a lot of that information can be referenced from within the Plastic Program Guide. So the guide provides information related to the documents required to be submitted during listings, registrations, verification approvals. It also lays out the timelines for each step of the process, the various requirements related to the documents, such as the communication agreement, the various legal deeds, representations, the eligibility requirements for the VVBs, and also proof of right requirements. Moving on to the standard, as I said before, it's the core document and lays out all the overarching requirements that all the projects need to meet, including those for the project start date, related to the project configuration. Standard provides information about various ways in which a project can be configured and designed. So all those requirements need to be met. There are comprehensive requirements related to stakeholder engagement. All those need to be adhered to as well. Safeguards, both social and environmental processes related to in case there are deviations from the methodology. All those rules are requirements are laid out in the standard, and also the validation and verification requirements for the projects. Moving on to the methodologies, as I said before, methodologies are key documents for the requirements for specific collection and recycling activities. They lay out the eligibility criteria, or as we call them, the applicability conditions for collection and recycling projects. They lay out the steps for demonstrating additionality, which is a core requirement under the program, and every project needs to demonstrate that its additional or its activities are over and above the baseline scenario, and procedures for calculating crediting baseline or determining the baseline scenario, and also the monitoring requirements, which includes the various data and parameters a project should monitor in order to be eligible to generate plastic credits. Plastic program definitions document is another important document which provides definitions of all the terms used throughout the plastic program requirements. You can refer to this to reference any terminology that's not clear. We've made an effort to compile all of them under this document. And lastly, there is the plastic program fee schedule, which is another important document that lays out all the various fees that are required to be paid by the project proponents to register with the plastic program. So there are three main components for this fee: the registry account opening and the annual maintenance fee. There's a project registration fee to be paid at the time of registration, and also the plastic credit issuance levy that is to be paid as and when issuances are requested for plastic credits. An important thing to note here is that this fee schedule does not include the fee for the validation and verification services. Those fees are determined by the VVBs, and projects are encouraged to get in touch with the VVBs to get an idea of how much that would be. And these fees could vary depending on the project location, complexity of the project, the number of site visits needed, and other factors, which I'm sure the VVBs will be able to provide more information to you about. Another important thing, the templates. We talked about a lot of templates like the project description, monitoring report, and as I said, all these templates have a consistent structure, and we've developed these, and our website includes these templates. You can refer to them. And also, again, I'd like to highlight that we are in the process of digitizing these templates for the project description and monitoring report. And in the future, the projects will be able to prepare the project descriptions and the monitoring report in the Verra Project Hub. I'd like to take a moment here to show you how these documents can be accessed. And here's the web link that you can see on this slide. You can go to this web link, click on it, and you will see the plastic program details tab here. Clicking on that will take you to another page where you can see the various options on the left, which say rules and requirements, methodologies highlighted in the yellow box. And once you click on the rules and requirements, you can see on the main screen requirements, templates, and forms and guidance. And once you expand on these, you can see all the various documents, templates, guidance documents that are available for access to anyone who wants to use them. And similarly, a user can navigate to methodologies to access them. Last but not the least in this section, I'm sure it's been a lot of documents, a lot of rules and requirements steps, and I hope I didn't confuse you all. I'd like to touch upon and highlight the role of the Verra registry that facilitates this entire, I'd say, journey of a project lifecycle. It is I'd say, with all the program requirements, the registry is core, facilitating all these transactions, serving as a central repository for all the information and documentation related to the projects, and most importantly, tracking the credits, their generation, retirement, cancellation. Project proponents use the registry to create a project record, to upload all the various documents at the various stages of the process. And most importantly, another function that the Verra registry has is to enable transparency in the process by publishing all the public documents on the registry so that anybody and everybody can look at those and ensure that specific information that's needed by any stakeholder is available publicly. So yeah, I'm sure that was a lot, but with that, I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Kristen, to take you through the further set of slides. And yes, we'll be available to answer questions. I hope we get a lot of them. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Verra.
Kristen, over to you.
Yep, that was a lot of information, but hopefully you feel better informed about what this process entails and what resources you can reference for further information. I know a lot of you have already started to ask some questions in the chat, which is great, and we're trying to respond to some of those questions now, and we'll get to even more in just a few minutes. So say you're interested, what should you do first? The most important first step is to consider your project's eligibility. And to do this, you're going to need to review all of the plastic program requirements, especially those encompassed within the plastic standard and the methodologies, to assess whether what you're doing complies with these rules and requirements. So on this slide, we've highlighted some of the key requirements to review, as they often impact whether you'll be eligible to register. So these are those very important requirements for additionality, those applicability conditions relevant to each methodology, which lay out things like the source of the plastic waste, the eligible end destinations of plastic waste for collection projects, and then the quality requirements for recycled plastic waste for recycling projects. There's also considerations made for the transboundary movement of plastic waste. And then, of course, we wanted to flag there's also some basic requirements surrounding project start date and project ownership that are really important to review upfront. And please don't discount the rest of the requirements. They're all just as important as what's here on this slide. We just wanted to highlight a few of these as they often have a bearing on eligibility. So as far as in terms of the next steps, if you are ready to, you've assessed whether you think your project is eligible and you're ready to get started, the next steps would be to open a Verra registry account if you don't have one already. As Varun referenced, the registry is where you'll upload the required documents, submit the requests associated with registering, and for that you will need an account. You'll also want to decide whether you want to pursue just validation or joint validation and verification. And as a reminder, projects that have already begun operating and have activities to verify can actually combine their validation with the verification of their first monitoring period. We also have noted here, we encourage you to be proactive about getting in touch with one of the approved BVBs to understand their availability, to assess your project and the cost associated with it. And the list of those BVBs, once again, are on our website and will be continually updated as new BVBs are approved. And of course, always refer to the full suite of program documents and requirements along the way. We also have other guidance documents to support you, such as the Develop a Project Quick Guide, which is shown here on the right. And since we have you all here today, we did want to take the opportunity to let you know that Verra is launching a digital project submission tool. On today's call, we've referenced the project description and monitoring report documents, and this new tool will allow projects to digitally prepare and submit them rather than using the Word documents we currently use. We hope that this helps to reduce preparation errors through embedded validation checks. It can harmonize the project creation and review process, and it will allow for integration with other tools to be released within the Project Hub. Verra is in the pilot stage of testing this, so we are inviting experienced and first-time project proponents to participate. If you're interested in testing the digital project submission tool, you can email hubsupport@verra.org with the information listed on this slide. You'll be able to reference this slide after the presentation if needed, and there's also an announcement on our website, and they will be able to help you understand what the next steps would be in piloting it. So our last section, we anticipated we would get a few questions about the market for plastic credits, so we decided to just include a few slides on this because we know oftentimes when projects are considering whether they want to pursue plastic credits, these questions may have a bearing on that answer. So oftentimes people ask, how do I sell my plastic credits? Does Verra help connect me to a buyer? As an independent standard setter, Verra is not engaged in the sale of plastic credits. So project proponents will be responsible for selling them, and there are a few methods for doing so. They might decide to, if they have a direct connection with an interested buyer, they can sell them that way, or they could also leverage brokers, other intermediaries, or marketplaces to connect with buyers. And the follow-up question is usually, how much does a plastic credit go for? And Verra does not track the price of plastic credits due to our role as a standard setter, but we expect the price to vary based on many factors, such as the location of the project, the end destination of the plastic waste, the material type and format, the project activity, the social impact. Basically, we know that these projects are very diverse, and for that reason, the market may be willing to pay different prices depending on what the activity or what the credit represents and the activity associated with it. Great. So that was what we wanted to share today in terms of presentation, and we've had a lot of great engagement in the Q&A chat. So we're going to try to get through as many questions as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. Varun and I will share in this. Let me get out my list of questions, and I'll start with this first one, which Varun, I'd love if you could help answer. Somebody asked, is it possible to issue plastic credits for projects that are already completed or operational? They want to understand, can plastic credits be issued retroactively?
So the answer is it depends on the project start date. So now we are accepting projects with a start date on or after 1st of January 2022. So if your project started on or after that date, you can issue credits for the retroactive period, that is the period that has already elapsed before today. And earlier, I'd also like to highlight that we were accepting projects for issuing retroactive credits, but that end date has come to an end now. So now we are only accepting projects which started on or after 1st January 2022. So that is what it is. I hope that helps. Kristen, if there's anything you'd like to add.
No, I think that's great. Or maybe one follow-up question actually that I can relate to this is, what should people think of in terms of the validation timeline associated with their project start date? What other requirements do they need to consider going forward?
Yes. So basically, if a project start date is, say, 1st January 2022, the projects will need to complete the validation within 2 years of their project start date. So that is the time you have to finish validation and to request registration for your project. So that is an important one to keep in mind so that you can plan accordingly and you don't miss on that deadline.
Wonderful. We also got a question that I can help answer about, should we be concerned about potential issues of double counting when selling plastic credits, but also selling a final product that the purchaser will classify as recycled content? This is a great question, because it helps us distinguish what our program is and how it is different than maybe a recycling standard or a chain of custody standard for recycled material. If a project, and specifically a recycling project, is registering with our program, they are not certifying the material itself. A waste recycling credit represents that 1 ton of plastic waste was recycled. And thus, there will be different claims associated with a waste recycling credit versus those content-related claims that would come from a recycled material. So in this sense, there would not be a conflict in double counting. And oftentimes, those chain of custody certifications, for example, for recycled material, may also support in your process of registering with our program. Oftentimes, they require really robust documentation and evidence. And I think we would all just say that that's only going to make the process easier for you if you have all of that information readily available and able to provide to one of the VBBs. Varun, another person asked, does Verra assign VBBs to the projects?
No, Verra does not assign VVBs to audit the projects. The VVBs need to be contracted by the project proponents themselves. Our only role is to approve the VVBs based on certain criteria that we follow. And once that's done, those VVBs are out there. You can refer to the list available on the Verra website and get in touch with them. And yes, contract the one that suits your needs. And we do not engage in any of those activities.
Wonderful. Thank you. One more question for you, Verun. Is the accuracy review a mandatory step? The person acknowledged, kind of the relationships between additional rounds of findings and stuff. So maybe we could just refresh everyone on the completeness and accuracy review as part of the registration and verification process.
Yes, sure. So the answer is yes. So for the foreseeable future, we will be conducting the accuracy review for all the plastic program projects. So it is a mandatory step, and every project needs to undergo both completeness and an accuracy review. Yeah.
I've got another question here that I can help answer. Somebody asked, regarding the issuance and selling of plastic credits, are there guidance of the types of claims we can or should make? This is a great question. Verra, we maintain this program for the certification of the collection and recycling activities and then the associated plastic credit issuance, but we do not certify the claims associated with plastic credits. For this, the claims that can be used will be at the discretion of the buyer. Generally speaking, Verra does think that terms like offset or neutrality are not always appropriate because they might not really reflect the environmental impact of them. But in general terms, as long as the project is transparently, or as long as the buyer is transparently communicating about their contributions made through the purchase of those plastic credits, that is a best practice. There are some guidelines for corporate plastic stewardship that were released as part of the 3R initiative, which was also responsible for the creation of the plastic standard. And stakeholders may find it interesting to reference those because it does include 3 examples of credible commitments that can be made with plastic credits, such as net zero plastic leakage and 100% recycled at end of life. These requirements or these guidelines, pardon me, within the corporate stewardship guidelines are in the process of being updated by the Plastic Footprint Network. So we encourage you to follow their work to see how those evolve over time. And switching gears a bit, we're going to go back to a project-related question. Varun, you might be the best one to answer this. Somebody asked if you could, and I know you touched on this a little bit during the presentation, but could you explain what often maybe delays a project in the process, or what adds more time to the process? What are the things people should anticipate?
So yeah, it's a tricky one, but yeah, I'll try my best to explain. So there could be various factors. For example, once the project is submitted, I'll start from the listing. And sorry for my long-winded response, because I'm sure it is going to be. So when you start with listing the project, it's important to ensure that all the instructional text within the templates is followed. So all the guidance is followed, and ensure that all that information is in there. So if that's not the case, if something's missed, or if something is not as per the template, then there could be delays starting from there as well, because we might request updates, and that is going to throw off the 10 business day timeline. Now, once the process progresses, say, to the validation, projects should try, and prepare for the audits really well. For example, if you're writing that the start date is, say, 1st January 2023, you should have an evidence to support that, because the VBB is going to ask for evidence to support all the statements that are made within the PD. So it's always good to be prepared and be proactive with collecting all such evidence to demonstrate conformance with the requirements. So if those evidences are not in place, the VBBs are going to raise findings, and then there will be that back and forth in resolving those findings, which is going to delay the process. Similarly, once all these findings are closed, which can significantly, I'd say, not significantly, but definitely delay the process, as opposed to efficiently closing the audit in one go if all the requirements are being met. So that is one example of a delay. And after that, it's important, once the documents are being submitted to Verra, ensuring that all the documents are complete, the information is there, and if there are any non-conformances, which could occur maybe due to misinterpretation of certain rules and requirements. For example, a requirement is to be interpreted a certain way, but it has been interpreted differently, and that could lead to Verra raising findings about that, asking for more information, clarification. So that those kind of things could also lead to some delays in the process. So those are a few things. And yes, most importantly, it is important, once any sort of finding is raised in the process, whether that is by the VBB during the validation or verification, or by Verra after the registration or verification approval review, it depends a lot how much time the VBB and the project proponent take to address those findings. If those time periods are, I'd say, if those are quite long, then that also, of course, throws away the entire process, the entire timeline. So we'd encourage you to start with ensuring that the documents are sufficiently complete, high quality, meeting all the requirements, and there's no, I'd say, it's not difficult if you follow all the instructions and templates. We try our best to be as clear as possible in the templates. So if all that is followed, if the guidance is adhered to, if all the requirements are being met, there are very little chances that there will be any of those, I'd say, unwanted delays in the process. So yeah, with that, I'd like to pause, and I hope that helped.
Thank you. I'll answer this next question, which is about whether a project could use both the plastic program and the VCS program. Really glad somebody asked this. The answer is yes, because these are distinct programs that are quantifying, and the credits issued represent different environmental benefits. So a project that's recycling plastic waste could register with the plastic program, and then the VCS program as well, assuming that there is a relevant methodology. And along those lines, there is one methodology that encompasses recycling that is approved under the VCS program currently. And there's another methodology that's under development, which it more broadly encompasses activities that displace the use of virgin plastic. So this is one that stakeholders should be on the lookout for and kind of track its development in case they are interested in seeing if that may be applicable to their recycling activities, for example. And I'll go ahead and answer another question somebody asked about how the plastic program and VCS program processes differ. Generally speaking, they are very similar in that they will follow the same process that Varun laid out as far as listing, registration, the ongoing monitoring, and then verification of the activities. There are some slight differences between the programs, but generally speaking, they will be very similar. And if we see, more projects are using both the VCS and plastic program, that's an example where we may develop joint templates to hopefully make that registration process even more streamlined for interested project proponents. Jumping to more of a technical question, we'll keep these somewhat light, but Vern, somebody asked for recycling credits, is the volume of what is quantified, does that correspond to the input of the dry weight or the output of the dry weight?
So the volume is quantified based on the output. So what is the output of the recycling facility that is eligible for being credited?
Thank you.
Short and sweet.
Yep, exactly. I thought, but useful. I think a lot of people may be asking that same question. Another question and a few different related questions that I'll clump up into one. People asked about EPR or how or whether a project could register with Verra's program as well as another plastic crediting program. The most important thing you need to know is that all credits issued under our program need to be real and unique activities, meaning that a project cannot quantify the same amount that has been quantified under another program. And also because of our, requirements around additionality, you need to think about whether that activity would have occurred or not without this project. So if the project is already, registered or if the project is already carrying out their activities and say, for example, providing EPR services, they wouldn't be able to register those same amounts with the plastic program, as this would create a conflict of double counting the activities. And the same thing goes for registering with other programs. Projects can potentially register their activities across programs, but they will need to take great care to make sure their monitoring and records for those activities are distinct so that the VVB knows that what is being quantified is unique under each program. I think I'm going to leave us time for just one or two more questions. How about, Varun, somebody asked, can projects be registered if they don't meet the methodology applicability conditions? Are there any exemptions to those?
So the answer is no. And sorry for being so straightforward with that, because the applicability conditions are the core eligibility requirements that every project must adhere to. And if any one of those are not met, there are no exemptions which are provided for those. So yeah, so all of those need to be met and adhered to in order to be eligible to apply the methodology and proceed with the next steps.
Wonderful. Well, with that, I think we are going to wrap up today's presentation. There were a ton of questions in the chat, so I apologize if we didn't get to yours. We may be able to provide written answers after the fact. So we'll, after this session, look through those questions asked and see what others we might what other answers we might be able to circulate to participants. We really appreciate your interest and participation in this webinar. As we mentioned, the recording will be shared after the fact, as well as that PDF, which will have links to relevant documents and will hopefully be a useful starting resource. If you ever have additional questions, you can send them to plasticstandard@verra.org, and we will get one of our team members to help answer them. So with that, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day wherever in the world they are.
Thank you very much for being a great audience and for asking such great questions. We are really enthused by seeing so much interest in the program. Looking forward to being in touch. Thank you. Thank you so much.